Hello, everyone. I'm going to make a promise to you, and I'm going to humbly ask you. I'm going to speak truths that need to be told. I'm going to ask that at least at the start of this talk that you put down your cell phones and computers for 30 minutes and see if we can have a conversation that makes a difference here. In February of 2019, my phone rang. It was the landline back when we got calls to landlines, and it was the head of rail for Nevada. And he said, Michael, I read what you've said about the state of rail planning and your criticisms, and we'd really like to have you bid on our request for proposal. We'd like to do something different in the state. And I said, sure, well, when's it due? He said, 7 days. And I said, well, I've never written a state rail plan proposal before, but I'll drop everything, but not if there's some incumbent firm out there that's, just going to get it anyway. He said, no, we really want you to bid on this. I'm not even supposed to be calling you, but we're very interested. So I did. I dropped everything. I submitted the plan. And I want to, particularly in light of Kevin speaking about rail plans, I want to just read for you our cover letter. Not all of it. We appreciate this project is particularly meaningful to us, as we have imbued our proposal with a set of common sense yet transformative approaches that advance the state of the art in state rail planning. We appreciate the opportunity to share our work with the Nevada Department of Transportation, having read over 500 transportation plans, including 250 state rail plans. I am a student of what does work and what has not worked in the commissioning of consulting firms to write these plans. Public sector stewards desperately want more from their limited funding than checking all the federal boxes for approval. They are so often dismayed when the product is nothing more than a set of reports on trends, demographics, and ungrounded possibilities. We need plans that are actionable, that generate projects that are funded and built. We need our plans to be commercially intelligent so that the private sector values the benefit of their investment in state transportation improvements. There are entrenched railroad interests in Nevada that are driven by their fiduciary responsibilities to their shareholders, regardless of the state's transportation priorities. Strategic rail finance can bring the executive-level relations and rail business acumen that is a requirement for fostering partnership with UPRR and BNSF to grow rail service in Nevada. The new Nevada State Rail Plan should only be initiated with a clear-eyed perspective on the imperative of succeeding with that challenge. SRF is uniquely positioned to forge that new level of collaboration. So I'm here primarily to publicly announce Vital Rail. It's a comprehensive rail service growth initiative for supercharging our continent's industrial productivity. In 2020, and Bob, if you'd put up that first display, that'd be great. Yeah. So 2 months later, after we proposal, the phone rang again, and it was Lee Bonner of Nevada DOT saying, Michael, you won. Now, if you can see this, our proposal scored 95 out of 100. The three other firms scored between 55 and 65 out of 100. I added up their annual sales out of curiosity, their annual revenues, and it's $33 billion. It's probably fair to mention that that's a lot more than our annual sales. So we established, I actually turned the clock off halfway through the contract period because I wanted to imbue this plan with everything that the continent needs to grow rail service in a meaningful way and in a way that attracts private sector capital. And what we found is that all the things that I had thought were possible in advising individual railroads all over the country, Iowa Northern and Utah Central and Iowa Interstate, and that you actually could operate effectively at a whole state level. You could catalog all the relevant stakeholders, you could put them into regions, and not just have town hall meetings where you've sort of gathered everybody together for a poster presentation, but where you could actually get real, sit down with people in their offices and find out what businesses are they doing now, what's on the drawing board. And I'll never forget the first time I went across the northern Nevada, having met for 3 days with mining companies and county leaders. And I got to my hotel room in Elko, and about a half hour later, I called one of my staff, and I said, I just did something in 25 minutes that took me 25 years to get to. And I wrote the Nevada Mining Materials Logistics Strategy. Mining is the #2 industry in Nevada. And I thought, all of these companies are doing their logistics and their procurement as individual companies. So everything's just converging. And you might not know a lot about mining. I certainly know a lot more now than I did before. Mining inputs are significant. And, of course, the outputs are significant. So you would think, well, would these mining companies share their logistics and procurement information? Because really, when it comes to large-scale collaboration, that's always the question that we have about our fellow human beings. Will people collaborate? And we went to them and said, would you share your, never thought of that before, but sure. Would you like to share your new $10 million rail facility that you only use 1 day a week, EP Minerals? Well, we hadn't thought of that before, but that's a really great idea. Would you share with other mining companies? Sure, no problem. Would you share with hay growers? Sure, no problem. So the idea of focusing and embracing entire, what we refer to as industrial systems. I don't mean within the walls of a plant. I mean all the mining in a state, and while you're at it, why not multiple states? Why not the continent? Of course we should be thinking out, where do we want to put lithium mines? Where do we want to put processing facilities? Where do we want to put factories? Where do we want to put battery plants? Where do we want to put recycling facilities? And of course we ought to be placing them logistically intelligent so that our supply chains are therefore efficient. I can tell you that the money that the last administration, has been doling out for foreign companies to mine in the United States are being done with no consideration of the logistics to and from those plants. So you've got lithium mines that are meant to be at the front lines of addressing climate change, and we're setting them up to have 200 heavy trucks a day moving in and out of the mining facilities. So in Nevada, we identified all the legacy rights-of-way. There used to be twice as many rail lines in Nevada, and we connected, in our plan, all of the existing supply chain elements so that they could be effectively served by rail. It's interesting, UP, and relating to UP, you might not know, UP essentially has all the rail lines in the state. There are no short line railroads, and BNSF only has very little used trackage rights on the northern route. And they attended all of our 8 regional working sessions. And the head of industrial development for UP, who, by the way, lives in Long Beach, and his role is to cover all of South Jersey, that's where I'm from, all of Southern California, and all of Nevada. So, of course, he's not able to really be involved with the mining companies and other industries there. And what he said was, Michael, you're talking to all the different businesses, and you're aggregating them into coherent new corridor strategies for new rail service. We aren't able to do that. We have such concerns about confidentiality that we don't talk to multiple businesses in a region or a corridor. Well, that's a fundamental problem if you're out to develop rail infrastructure and you're just narrowly looking at what's the economics of serving one business and then another business. So the model for what we call statewide rail-enabled economic development has been created. It's a 700-page public document. It's chock full of all the innovations and commercially relevant approaches. We mapped every single truckload quantity shipper in the state, 550. Imagine an electronic map where you've got every rail line, every siding. We mapped every single 600 rail sidings. 85% of them are not used. And so on and on. It's a game plan for all stakeholders to gather around, and particularly to attract private sector capital. I'll speak more about that. But our good ideas aren't enough at Strategic Rail Finance and OnTrack North America. So, Bob, if you'd put up the next demonstration. So I'm in and out of Washington all the time. I've had thousands of meetings there, and observed that, boy, there's so much talk in the rail industry. I don't know about other industries, but it's mainly because there's so many people interested in rail, and there's so many ongoing questions and challenges, and we don't ever actually gather and coordinate and think together. So I've worked for years on building a methodology for large-scale thinking and planning and acting. And if you think of Wikipedia as being a great international, creation in the world of propaganda and misinformation, it's really become a pretty dependable source to get as close to facts as we know. But it's just information. It's not thinking together, dialoguing, and problem solving, and that's what my team has created. And I have two patents. No, they're not patents, they're trademarks. One for IntelliSynthesis, which is our thinking and dialogue methodology. Another is IntelliConference. So these are the, if you just scroll down, let's see. Yeah, here we go. These are the 10 IntelliConference series that we've convened, or we've started convening, because we've gathered the initial dialogue drafts. So I'm gonna read them. Rail growth capitalization, rail regulatory excellence, rail business culture transformation, rail management, rail labor, containerized international freight, revitalizing the rail carload system, rail energy efficiency, rail transportation land use, rail technology adoption, rail trucking coordination. Let's just take a look at one so you get a sense of how these are thought out. Rail growth capitalization. Yeah, thanks. Thanks. Can you hear me now? Great. So we start out, a simple background statement. North American freight railroads require significant capital investments and strategic alignment among multiple stakeholders. Intelligent collaboration among the private sector investment community, rail management, and government will foster a rail growth strategy that strengthens a multimodal network, incentivizes public and private investment, and optimally serves supply chains. The key to facilitating this long-term growth strategy is to broaden investors' valuation horizons, integrate public policies, and empower rail management. Core question: what performance measures, financial incentives, and public policy adjustments can investors, rail management, and government reconceive to expand capitalization of the modernization and growth of North American freight railroads and enhance their strategic value to supply chain efficiency? Then we have the opening dialogue questions, and I'll just give you a quick look at that, and we'll keep moving. So this kind of specificity has been applied to each of these, what we consider the 10 most important dialogues to be had in North America to move, to grow rail in service to the many industrial systems that it serves. I want to go to, so this is your invitation to participate in this. And I know how much you know. We know how much you know. And this is a platform that we've established. We actually use the Wikipedia open source software to enable, and AI, to enable large-scale human intelligence, because we know that you can't have artificial intelligence without human intelligence. Why don't you just go to the rail carload system IntelliConference. There is an urgent need to reflect on and reinvent our rail carload system in light of the decline of coal shipments, reshoring and reindustrialization, new natural resource development, increasing population and freight demand, and urgent environmental congestion and financial challenges. Core question: how can stakeholders work together to build a rail carload system that best supports the nation's sustainable prosperity? So this is all on OnTrack North America, and on the side you'll see where it's got Enter Vital Rail, and you'll see these 10 dialogue agendas right there. So, as I said, you're all invited to join this important work. This requires three things, which, although in short supply today, are actually eminently available to us. One, thinking and acting with whole systems in mind. Two, collaborating and coordinating with all stakeholders. And three, more railroads. Fortunately, I say this fortunately, what is not working is so prevalent and so widespread that changing the unworkability is something we can all do. It isn't just the responsibility of large corporations and political leaders. And this is not just a problem with Class I management, so ranting about the Class I railroads is not helpful. Almost all business leaders in North America are too steeped in self-promoting competition, which is fine for marketing beer and toothpaste, but wholly inadequate for conceiving and implementing infrastructure and transportation systems. I'll describe two examples where consulting firms fall short because the input they give to clients is often superficial and slanted to please instead of guide. We were advising the largest transloader in Port of New Orleans, the Kearney Companies, and at the time, Mayor Mitch Landrieu was endeavoring to sell the New Orleans Public Belt Railroad. And he engaged KPMG, their top people, to do evaluation of the Public Belt Railroad, which you may know serves the 6 Class I railroads that come into New Orleans. They had done evaluation, $135 to $195 million, they said. We went to the port director and said, we have a suspicion that that's overvalued, and it would be a real problem for you if you've got a private equity-owned holding company now in the middle of you and all your customers in the port, and they've overpaid for something, and their only choice is going to be to raise all their tenants' rates, and those tenants can start looking around for other ports they could go to. So we stepped in and unpacked their financial performance of the Public Belt for the last 10 years. We dive in and get very specific on this kind of engagement, and we saw that KPMG just hadn't considered how much of the revenue was post-Katrina hurricane relief funds. They hadn't considered that the Public Belt was making a lot of profit from returning wheels that were part of a national mandate that the FRA had issued, and those wheels were just about all done. And we properly valued the Public Belt Railroad at $13 million. And based on that, we said to the port director, why don't you offer the mayor the 2 little used warehouses and wharfs on the Mississippi River so that they can combine 2 urban parks into the largest riverfront urban park in the country, and that's what happened. And but it makes you wonder. I mean, I'm sure those are really good people at KPMG, educated, probably the best amongst our, young people. And, I have a friend in the industry. He's the 2nd generation owner of a rail engineering firm. He said, Michael, I love what you're doing, and, I'd like to work with you personally. I said, well, we stand by what we preach. So, are you willing to have your engineering firm also embrace our principles? Well, no, Michael, I can't do that. My engineering firm is stuck in the old engineering firm adage. We only recommend what requires more engineering. And this is a great guy. This is a long married guy that's raised his kids right, and he owns the firm. And so this brings us really to the fundamental question of our time. What is a business person's responsibility to contribute to society? So let's get that question straight out. Let's answer that. The primary responsibility of business people is to contribute to the common good. That needs to live at the heart of all commercial activity in the 21st century. If we are not continually evolving how our businesses contribute to a sustainable future, then we have the responsibility to find a company or organization that is and work for them. It's that simple. We no longer have time to argue about economic or political theory or claim that it is just how business is, while the planet heats and the oceans rise. So I'm speaking truth, but I certainly hope, and my intention is to uplift all of you and all of our fellow people. And this, what I'm saying needs to be said. I'm really clear about that, because it is rampant. And I'll just say this is a time for real heroes. The kind of women and men that our grandchildren can reminisce with pride over what we did for our world. I am speaking to you and, of course, to all the people in the field and in offices throughout North America. What exactly does it mean to be the kind of real-life hero the children around us want us to be in our companies and organizations? They would say, please, Mom or Dad, Aunt or Uncle, Grandmom or Grandpa, please put our family's short-term self-interest just enough to the side so you can advance what is in the world's best interests. In other words, please shift from profiting for profit's sake to profiting from progress. I am here to attest that, as we have repeatedly demonstrated in our work, acting in good faith is infinitely more insightful and profitable than competition. That is a fact for networked infrastructure systems such as railroads. The path to IntelliSynthesis and the level of intelligence that we're able to bring everywhere we go is because I invite you to step into IntelliSynthesis. All you have to do is, like I just said, take self-interest, put them aside, including whether the engagement that you've been brought into gets to continue or not. If it shouldn't be continued, then give that client the best advice and move on. There's plenty of work to do, and they'll want you more anyway. So Vital Rail has been built step by step from what we have learned in engagement after engagement, advising on infrastructure projects in 47 states and Canadian provinces, while establishing the principles, methods, and tools that enable Vital Rail to take the lead in facilitating this much-needed transformation. Again, they are: 1, thinking and investing sustainably in whole regions and whole industrial systems; 2, engaging in large-scale collaboration and coordination; and 3, ensuring rail-enabled industrial productivity. To illuminate the current dynamics in land transportation, let's consider Nevada, where mining is the second largest industry. Only 4% of all freight moving in, out, and through the state by truck and by rail moves by rail to or from a Nevada business. Now, we unpack 12 million line items of freight data in order to pinpoint these statistics. Only 0.25% of the freight moving moves by rail from one Nevada business to another. That's what you find in a country in Africa where the ore is pulled out and gone right to the port, and nobody really gets to, the communities don't get uplifted. And sure enough, there's a significant copper mine near Ely. They ship 28 truckloads of truck ore right through downtown Ely, right, to go north and eventually to the ports in Washington to go to China. So in this room, we know that there are no technological replacements on the horizon for moving heavy weight over land by rail. Yet in the United States, the trucking industry is 10 times larger than the freight rail industry. While one of the most robust and safe rail networks in the world, earning $100 billion a year, the trucking industry earns approximately $1 trillion a year. Trucks are essential, but this difference is unsustainable, especially if we don't disconnect economic growth from an incessant increase in truck transportation. And believe me, no matter how many success stories we see in the industry press about another new rail-served facility, 10 more facilities have been constructed as truck-only right now as we speak. That's what's happening. And what is most harmful is that big business and state economic development entities focus on the largest new industries in the largest demographic areas of each state, leaving rural America with less and less of the rail needed to uplift local economies. Vital Rail addresses all 7 major requirements for rail service growth: public relations, government relations, employee relations, customer relations, community relations, shipper relations, investor relations. Former executive directors of the AAR and the Shortline Association both told me that we excel in 3 areas they do not. They were being very honest: public relations, public policy, and financing. As we know, rail is not just any industry. This is railroads, a message that resonates across the political and community landscape. The rail industry, however, is its own unconvincing advocate. That shortcoming is understandable for many historic reasons, including when you have a society that's made road building a public investment, it totally changes the whole business environment for doing business. That can be addressed. Sharing with government leaders in down-to-earth practical language that relates the value of freight railroads to their district and state, the doors of Washington have opened to me for meetings with 70 U.S. Senate offices and 175 U.S. House offices. I've never taken a dime for that work, never given a dime. And yet, we convened rail summits in the U.S. Capitol building, not the Hilton or the Hyatt, in the U.S. Capitol building twice. One was with 30 leaders from the House, Senate, executive branch, labor, and shippers for a 5.5-hour dialogue on a new way forward for the rail industry. Another one was attended by 55 congressional transportation staff. This is a letter on congressional letterhead. The Northeast Midwest Senate and Congressional Coalitions, that's 18 states, House and Senate offices. We are pleased to invite you and your staff to a luncheon briefing on the United States freight railroad industry. Specifically, the briefing will address freight transportation's relevance to the Northeast Midwest region and will explore the role of freight transportation in economic development and environmental planning. Wednesday, December 9th, U.S. Capitol, SC5. There's the largest briefing room in the U.S. Capitol building. 90 minutes, not one of the 55 congressional staff left. Afterwards, they just wanted to talk and talk and talk. Sponsors of the event and moderators of the discussion are Michael Sussman and Drew Miller with Strategic Rail Finance, a consulting group working to coordinate public and private project funding. Just scroll down to the bottom. Is signed by 2 United States senators, Senator Jim Jeffords, Patrick Moynihan, and the then 2 heads of the Railroad Subcommittee. And we didn't give it again, this was not lobbying. This is what's possible when you approach government without a vested interest. The doors open and folks say, come on in, and we'll talk as long as you want. All right, to communicate this message most effectively, we developed the Land Freight Life Cycle Impact Calculator, which evaluates the return on investment by comparing the costs of building, using, and maintaining railroads versus highways across 17 impact factors. So this is on our website. We really haven't even gone public with this yet. All you have to do is put in the miles and the tons, and it tells you how many truckloads, how many rail cars, And then it puts it into the 17 factors and gives you the difference in life cycle costs for each factor, and then aggregates it into social, financial, and environmental, and then puts it, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, it then puts it into, those are the 17 factors, and then puts it into 3 what we call citizen-friendly data points. Person hours lost to congestion, energy wasted, and CO2 emitted. And we did that in partnership with University of Tennessee's Institute for a Secure and Sustainable Environment. Moving the same goods as a 1-mile train on its own right-of-way requires a 27-mile convoy of trucks on the highway. It takes 3 to 6 times more money to build 1 lane mile of an interstate than a mile of track. The rail lasts decades longer than asphalt and concrete and has substantial value at the end of its useful life, whereas highway materials require a significant cost to maintain, replace, and dispose of. Getting the use of the wheel right for moving heavy weight over land will deliver cascading benefits to commerce, society, and the environment. We love truck drivers and the way they serve our community. However, the space, energy, and capital efficiency of moving weight with a steel wheel on a steel rail must be communicated powerfully, and not as a competitor with trucking, but as a partner in a balanced multimodal logistics system. One of the problems has been that the rail industry and community leaders have been stuck in a mindset where rail line construction costs are viewed as a challenging expense to overcome. They focus on, what do we need to bring up that condition of that track? Because, boy, if we could bring up the condition of that track, then we could go get customers. What we do is we go identify who are the users going to be. Once you identify the users and the natural resources that can be brought out of an area and the supply chains that are being served by truck, rail line construction and maintenance is a minor investment hurdle. There is, and that's what we've done in case after case, because rail line construction is one of the most secure investments there is. Now, with your help, we're not planning to do all this ourselves. We'll initiate statewide rail-enabled economic development for every state in the country. It's doable. Every state has a unique focus. And this is a continental effort. Of course, supply chains don't stop at any national or state borders. We move 6 times more freight over the Canadian border and the Mexican border by truck than we do by rail. There is ample capital for all viable rail development. Private equity, infrastructure investors, and sovereign funds are loaded with money and would like nothing better than to invest in coherent freight rail growth initiatives. What has been missing are the comprehensive investment plans that identify the specific commercial opportunities that can be served by new rail infrastructure. In the Nevada State Rail Plan, we identified and mapped $740 million of rail construction, not simply for choke point and congestion mitigation projects on the main lines, like every other state rail plan, but for branch lines and sidings that shippers told us they would use if we worked them into the state plan. Think about it. In the 19th century, the rail industry was the reason capital flowed from around the world into North America before there were lines and customers in place. Applying that early understanding of whole regions and supply chains, we have orchestrated the financial turnaround and recapitalization of over 20 railroads. In each case, we illuminate the value of that railroad to the towns, counties, and the state. We rally the political leaders, lenders, and state and federal agencies to collaborate in support of the success of those railroads. We explain to the state's Department of Agriculture how this rail project is a perfect applicant for their loan program because the railroad serves agriculture. And apply that across the board. And one example. In 2008, I orchestrated a $43 million in long-term low-interest growth financing for the Iowa Northern Railway's Sabin family when they couldn't find any way to upgrade their 145-mile rail line to serve unit trains of ethanol at the height of the ethanol boom. And of course, as many of you know, last year the Canadian National bought the Iowa Northern for $230 million. Now's the time to broaden this collaboration. So I'm just going to put the email address for you to just let us know you want in some capacity. There's a lot more on the site for you to choose how you want to participate, and then it's an evolving process, so don't be afraid about this. You just signal, and our staff will be in touch with you. So also, when you register, I'm going to send out our new 8-page paper on rail-enabled rural economic development. I wrote it after working for 2 Mississippi River ports last year on a rail reconstruction plan for 2 rural broken down lines that have been out of service for 30 years. So lastly, I want to dispel 2 common misconceptions that are thought to be true about railroads. One is that only moving over some mythical distance like 750 miles is viable for rail. Visit any steel mill in the country and observe how they convey materials from one part of the plant to another. They do it by rail, not trucks. Some of history's most profitable rail line moves have been less than a mile, transporting goods between nearby plants. Take the average length of our 600 Class II and Class III railroads, 72 miles, and they are almost all profitable businesses. The other crippling misconception about railroads is that they are less flexible somehow than trucks. Ask any truck driver how they feel about driving across a muddy field. Trucks go where we build roads, and trains go where we build tracks. It's time to reconnect with our power to determine where we want to strategically invest in both modes to develop infrastructure that supports commerce and communities. We can do this together. Smiling children and profitable satisfaction will be our just rewards. All right. See everybody during the rest of the day.